Hey friend, welcome back to Fearless Anxiety. In today's episode, I want to talk about driving with anxiety. I dealt with this myself when I had anxiety, so I know it can be one of the scariest things to try to overcome. So my goal today is to cover why it happens, why it feels so overwhelming, and most importantly, how you can overcome it. All right, without further ado, let's jump in. Back when I had anxiety, there would be times where I was driving and I'd start to feel a panic attack coming on. And then I'd start to get really lightheaded. When that would happen, my mind would race with worry. What if I pass out? What if I lose control? What if I get into a crash? And then what happened is my brain started associating driving with these fears. When I'd get behind the wheel, I'd worry that I was going to pass out and get into an accident. I then noticed that I was starting to have avoidance behaviors. At first, I didn't want other people in the car with me. I didn't want my wife in the car. I didn't want my friends in the car because it just added to the pressure. I felt like I might pass out, get into an accident, and put them in harm's way as well. So whenever possible, I would only drive whenever I was alone. Then, not long after that, I started avoiding busy highways and instead just sticking to side roads or even not driving at all when possible. But here's what I realized. It was never about driving itself. No, it was about my getting anxiety or a panic attack and passing out while driving. Again, the fear wasn't my ability to drive. It was what my anxiety would do to me while I was driving. I want to repeat that because it's a big misconception. A lot of people think driving anxiety means you're scared of driving itself. That is not true. If you've ever struggled with this, then I know you'll understand that. All right, so you might be like I was. You might feel like you have to avoid highways, long drives, or driving at all. But here's the truth. First, panic attacks don't make you lose control. You feel like you will, but I promise you're not going to. Second, you can drive while you're anxious. I know it's uncomfortable, but you can do it. I've done it, and I've watched my clients as they've done it. Third, and this won't come as a surprise, avoidance makes it worse. The more you avoid driving, the stronger your fear of driving becomes. The reason for that is because when you tell your brain that you're afraid of driving, that reinforces the belief that driving is dangerous. All right, so how do you overcome driving anxiety? The way out of this is not to avoid driving. Instead, it's actually to get behind the wheel and drive. I talk about this all the time on this channel. The way to overcome your fears and the way to overcome anxiety in general is to do that which makes you fearful. That's how we become fearless towards anxiety. So in this case, it's putting ourselves in the driver's seat and actually driving. That's how we overcome driving anxiety. But I am not going to send you out there without a plan. We need a plan because when we have a plan, we feel more prepared. And when we feel more prepared, we always feel more comfortable. So your plan is going to be called the Fearless Approach. And if you've been following this channel, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You are going to implement the Fearless Approach whenever you feel like anxiety is coming on while you're driving. And if you're like, what the heck is the Fearless Approach? Don't worry, I've put a link below that shows you a breakdown of the Fearless Approach. And it also shows all the steps of the recovery process. It's free and it's called the 5-step cure to anxiety and panic attacks. When you're driving, the step of the Fearless Approach that I want you to concentrate on most is step number 4, which is called encouraging anxiety. Oftentimes, what happens is when you're driving, you start to feel panicky. You feel your anxiety coming on really fast and you get afraid. It can feel very overwhelming. But all you need to do is you need to implement step number 4 and encourage your anxiety to get worse. I can't tell you how many times I had to do this when I was driving as I was recovering from my anxiety. What would happen is I'd feel my panic coming on and I'd feel really lightheaded and even dizzy. And I'd say, okay, bring it on. Give me all you got. In other words, I was actually trying to make my panic and dizziness worse. I know that sounds weird and very counterintuitive, but I promise you that it works. The reason it works is because it completely flips the script on anxiety. Because instead of allowing my brain to run wild with anxious thoughts about having a panic attack and getting into an accident, I was telling my brain that I'm not afraid of anxiety and to give me as much anxiety as possible. What that does is it slows down the release of adrenaline and stress hormones and thereby decreases your panic. So by asking for more anxiety, I actually ended up experiencing less anxiety. That's kind of wild, right? Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But let me know in the comments below if you have any questions on that. I also want to give you a few tips. Tip number 1, start small. Don't go from not driving to immediately driving on the interstate. Instead, I recommend just starting in a parking lot. Drive around the parking lot for a while and get used to being in that environment without any pressure. Tip number 2, gradual exposure. Once you're comfortable sitting in the car, start driving in low traffic areas like quiet neighborhoods and empty streets. Build up that comfort level before moving to busier roads. This is just like with swimming. You don't go right into the deep end. No, you start in the shallow end and you work your way there. Tip number 3, welcome anxiety. Again, when anxiety shows up, don't fight it. Instead, encourage it and try to make it worse. And always remember that anxiety is just adrenaline. It cannot hurt you. Tip number 4, consistently go out driving. Our brain learns through experiences. We have to consistently go out and go driving so that our brain learns that this is not a dangerous or a scary situation. By getting behind the wheel on a regular basis, your brain will soon learn that, and it's going to stop flooding you with all this adrenaline and stress hormones. All right, let's finish with the biggest lie that anxiety will try to convince you of. Anxiety will try to convince you that you're not in control. But let me tell you something. You are. You are always in control. Anxiety just makes it feel like you aren't. So again, remember that all anxiety is doing is putting a lot of adrenaline and a lot of stress hormones into your body, and it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. But you can still drive your car when you're uncomfortable, and you're going to be just fine. Okay, make sure you download the free guide below. Again, it's called the 5-Step Cure to Anxiety and Panic Attacks. That's the blueprint for anxiety recovery. Also, do me a huge favor and hit the like button and subscribe button on the way out. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.